Let's jump in and let's get this recorded and get this started.
You got it.
Thanks so much. Well, welcome everyone. This is our resume refresh career fundamentals workshop, first week of the spring semester. I'm Coach Will. I work mainly with MBAs and working professionals and different specialty masters, but love to look at resumes of all of our students. I've looked at a ton of MSBA resumes over the year and specialty masters or MS resumes, I should say. And I've got lots of tips for you today as you think about refreshing your resume. So I just want to start with getting in the chat, if I can get my controls to work here. What would you like to get out of today's session? So please add into the chat, what would you like to get out of today's session? Could be one word, could be a brief sentence, but I'll give you a moment to type away. What would you like to get out of today? So I can really emphasize those things when I'm on those slides.
I'm seeing how to quantify what I currently do onto my resume so I can change career paths. Current job application trends. These are good ones.
Yeah, these are good. And I know it takes a little time to type if you have a little bit longer thing you want to add. And feel free to add comments or questions throughout the chat. Sometimes I'll answer them right away, but sometimes I'll pause and I'll pick them up later, and sometimes I'll wait to the end. We definitely will have Q&A at the end.
So this is a good one. Everyone has an opinion on resumes, and I've had mine professionally rewritten 4 to 5 times, but the outcomes are all different. And yet everyone also says that ATS kills them, and also that networking is the only way to go. So it's frustrating.
Oh my goodness, I love so much about this. Thanks, John. I'm right there with you. Frustrating, a million different people looking at different things. Yeah. Okay, we'll keep those coming in as if there's anything you want me to dive more deeply into, but just for sake of time, we can start moving forward again in our deck. So here's my agenda today, basically 4 sections. I'm going to talk about what your mindset should be and the myth of the perfect resume. I'm going to give you some ideas about generating new resume content, some different tools and techniques you can use. Also talk about some ways to get feedback on your latest draft of your resume. And then John pointed out this in his comment is what to do beyond the resume. The resume is one part, but then there is the networking part. There's a few animation pieces in here too that I want to make sure that it all works perfectly. But a lot of this content is pulled off of one of my favorite authors in this career development space, specifically job seeking, Steve Dalton. So he has 2 books that I really like. If you've ever met with me, I've probably talked about the 2-hour job search, especially if you're job searching or networking. And that's a book that we have a lot of copies of in the CVCC. So if you're local and you can swing by the office, you can pick a copy of that up. It's also pretty cheap to buy a copy or available at a lot of local libraries. But the other book, The Job Closer, specifically talks about resumes. And so as I was prepping for this, I re-listened to that section on the audiobook version of that I have. And it's just, I really like it. I almost was like, I should just play the 42-minute chapter on resumes for you and just like leave it at that. But yes, this is really good. And then there is also, he has very active on LinkedIn, a LinkedIn Q&A forum for both of these books. And it's really a helpful group to join. So I would recommend all of Steve Dalton's stuff. Okay. So I just want to point out that there's a couple of assumptions I have making this presentation, but you might not fit into this. And so I have a couple of ideas just in case you are in, not this category. But really what I'm thinking about this is most people at this point of their career have a resume, even if it's not a great version of a resume, they have something that they're starting from. Also, most people are updating their resume because they're going to be using it for something like job searching or internship searching or networking. Maybe they're not to job and internship specific applications, but know they want to have an updated resume for networking. And likely the reason why this topic of refreshing your resume stood out to you is because maybe you're feeling stuck, or you're wanting just to refresh and take a second look at it. Or it could be that you're like, I feel like my resume is in pretty good shape, but I just want to make sure that I'm, following the latest trends. But if that's not you, if you're here because you're a new student and when you saw this advertised, you're like, I'm starting my program this semester and I know I need to get my resume into Carlson format, or I really don't have a resume, right? Never made one, or I have a really, really outdated one, or I can't even find the file. Um, if that's you, there are a few things here that you can go to. And my producer extraordinaire, Julie, has a bunch of links that I've shared with her. And one of them is to our resume templates. So this should click to where our resume templates for Carlson live. There are, I think, about 13 different ones for our 13-ish different programs. So if you're MSBA student or an MSMK, Master Marketing student. There's different resume templates. There's even a template for our professionals with more than 8 years, 10 plus years of experience. So you can find different versions of it, but most of the program specific templates are the same. And there's a lot of great, much more comprehensive videos that we have there. So these are things that you can come back to. Once this session is done, I'm going to be sending out to everyone who registered a copy of this deck. So you have all the links there. I'm just having Julie put in some of the important links I want you to have in real time. And then also you'll have a recording of this session today. Okay, so for the first part of the session, myths and mindsets here, mindsets and myths. So these are quotes from the book. And this goes back to one of the comments earlier in the chat. He asked 10 different certified resume reviewers. You're going to get 10 different opinions on a resume. And I fully endorse this quote. There's no such thing as a perfect resume, because you may talk to 10 different people and 10 different people say, I want a 1-page. I want as many pages as possible, as many as it takes. I want the education at the top. I want the education at the bottom. I want skills at the top. There's so many different things that everyone looks for differently. There's not going to be one perfect resume out there. Another thing that I love about this is, so in the book, Steve Dalton, the author of The Job Closer in the resume chapter, talks about this concept that he's gotten from one of the professors at the MBA school that he worked at. And this is the quote. So your job search will probably take you about 100 hours. Your resume should take no more than 3 of them. And Steve and I agree on this, is that a resume, while it's important and you should dedicate significant amount of time to it, it should not be the bulk of what you're spending your time on when you're job searching or internship searching. Now, I don't know if a job search or an internship in 2025 is going to take roughly 100 hours, but I want you to think about that 3% of the amount of time. It should not be the majority of what you're spending your time on. So I like to call that time boxing. Give yourself a time box. If you want to dig more deeply into that, check out this book. It's a good book on some concepts about how to not do overkill with the amount of time you spend on a resume. Okay, moving along quickly. Like I said, it's going to be a fast 30 minutes. This is refreshing your resume, some ideas for refreshing that content. So the very first thing I want you to do is, well, I know we sent the link in the chat to the template. I want you to pause for a second and reflect. Pause and think. Don't worry about typing things in. Don't worry about formatting right away. I want you to pause and think about your professional brand. And that can be really ambiguous and broad. So I have a couple of resources and links. Some of these Julie put in the chat right away so that you can take a look at a couple of these. But the first set of links I want you to be thinking about, or first set of resources, I should say, is a personal branding worksheet. So we use this personal branding worksheet for our working professional program called the Greenlight program. But this is a really helpful worksheet for reflecting on a lot of different elements of your personal and professional brand, some space to type in ideas. So that could be one tool that you use as you're pausing and reflecting before starting to fill out your resume. I also have a screenshot of another video, a video on resumes. That's the first part of I think a 5 video playlist on YouTube on our CVCC YouTube site. And specifically minutes 2 through 7:05 on this video of purpose, prep, and mindset really helps you get in the mindset of how you should be thinking about what you want to put in your resume. So spend some time reflecting. Another thing you can do to help with your language and what you're going to write in your resume is Clifton Strengths. We have multiple assessments that we offer in the CVCC, but one of the most popular ones is Clifton Strengths. And if you haven't taken it, or you haven't taken it a while and want to update your Clifton Strengths results, you can meet with a coach. So Julie put the link in the chat to set up a coaching appointment. Or if you worked with the coach regularly, like if you've worked with me, just email me and say, hey, well, I want to take the Clifton Strengths, and I'll help you get set up to take that. But that's an assessment that can give you language that you can be using when drafting your resume. So reflection, career assessments. Another tool that we talk a lot about, all the different coaches say, for how do you gather language for updating your resume is, well, there's some official documentation you may have access to. Hopefully your company and your manager is supporting doing annual reviews. Could be a year-end review and you just got that, or you're going to be getting it here soon. You may have the opportunity through your HR department to do a 360 evaluation, and that's documented stuff that you can be using. If not, if that's not something you have access to, or it's not time to get those, and that's not coming up for a while, you could also set up one-on-ones with individuals. Could be with your current manager, with colleagues, past colleagues, classmates. Could be mentors, but people that would be able to speak truth into your life about what do they think about you, or what are some things you might want to include in your professional brand. So reflection, assessment, and feedback. Those are 3 things I want you to be doing before picking up the pen and writing down on paper or typing out your resume and get moved forward with what you're going to actually put in there. The other thing that I have been using a lot as another career coach that I really respect, Jeremy Schiefling, he talks about using AI as your muse, using AI to help you with writing, whether it's an email, whether it's a report, whether it's an assignment, or a resume, using AI to help you with writing. So I have 3 different prompts in here. And we also have additional prompts that you could be using. But I really think that one of AI's best generative features is with drafting things, writing samples, and in this case, a resume. So if you're starting from scratch and you're creating new bullet points, here's a sample prompt you could use. Draft a sample bullet point for an MBA resume. My experience is in blank function in blank industry. And Julie put in the chat this link to Copilot, Microsoft Copilot with Enterprise Data Protection. So you can use the U of M's login to get into Copilot and have more data privacy and protection in there. You can use your preferred AI. So if you're more of a ChatGPT person or Gemini or different settings or different tools, just maybe think about what settings you're using if you're uploading a lot of personal resume information. Now, if you're just writing like, this is what I did without my name and my full entire resume, probably not going to have too many issues there with uploading that. So I did this. I added a little bit of detail just to give Copilot a little bit more narrow response here, but it has draft sample bullet points for an MBA resume. My experience background is in supply chain and operations in a medical device manufacturing company. Not actually where I work, but just giving an idea of, what are some ways that you could, if this was your industry or if this was your function, and you can see what it kicks out. I wouldn't use bolded texts like this. I wouldn't simply copy and paste this, but in looking at these aren't bad for giving you some ideas for how you might update your bullet points. So the main point here is use AI as a way to give you some ideas of how to write. So here's another one, another step. If you're going to be revising your current bullet points, so let's say that you already have a resume, you already have gotten the bullet points in a way that you think these are fairly close to what I do. I don't love them, or I want to update them. I want to give them a refresh. So these are bullet points on my current resume. Revise these bullets to demonstrate blank competencies. So that's the prompt that I fed into Copilot Next. And it's a little pixelated because it's copy and pasting and then getting stretched on here. But you can see, while still using those previous bullet points, giving it some different competencies. So the prompt specifically was problem solving, strategic thinking, strong communication skills. Those are the 3 competencies that I wanted it. And as you see, most of these AI tools want you to give it more direction. So, these revisions should help demonstrate these 3 things. How do these changes look to you? And usually there's ideas of other ways you can refine this prompt. Now, you're probably not going to want to include for most of your resumes, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bullet points. But it gives you a lot of different ones that you could say, hey, I like this, or I might make some tweaks to this, or this gives me some ideas of how to wordsmith my current bullet points. And then another thing that you could do is you could take a prompt and take your current resume and the job description that you're planning to apply for. So career coaches always say, tailor your resume to a job description. Well, how do you do that? So here's a prompt you could use. Draft sample bullet points based on my resume. So you could copy and paste or upload if that AI tool allows for an upload of a document. Again, you might want to scrub out things like your name, your address, your email, LinkedIn, stuff like that. If you're like, I don't want to feed that into the system, or just set it on to like, private uploads, things like that. But then also take the job description and paste that in, and then see what it outputs. I'm going to pop over here. I see the chat moving a little bit. So, okay, so general question here. Should we be drafting individual customized resume for each job? Oh, that's a great question. I don't think that you should do a different resume for every job. I will say you should look at your resume and see if it matches the job description you're applying for. And for many students, they may be having multiple targets, general targets. They may be let's say it's an MBA who's interested in marketing and product management. And those resume bullet points might look pretty similar. They might move bullet points from different order. I want to emphasize one bullet point or accomplishment more so than others. But I would say in general, you're not going to do massive overhauls for every application. And I also think that's just too much time. So having 1, maybe 2 resumes per function that you're targeting, that might be worth having multiple, but not every single application. Okay. So, couple cautions. You want to audit what AI spits out to you. So here are the 5 things that I look for in a bullet point. So I look for action verbs. Are they relevant verbs? Are they strong? Not passive? So that's the first thing I look for in a bullet point. The second thing I look for is it understandable? Do I understand generally? Maybe I don't work in that space, but I generally have a sense of what you did. It's not too technical, it's jargon free. It's not perfect English grammar, but it's resume grammar in that it's not so brief and concise that I can't understand because you've taken out too many words that just fit it onto one page. Do you include the tools and techniques that you used? Maybe it's you use SQL as our MSBA students would do, or Tableau, or other visualization software, or Excel, or maybe it's something like a customer segmentation project. What tools and techniques did you use? I also look closely for numbers. Numbers like size and scope numbers, such as like how many people on a team did you manage? I also look for impact numbers. This is what really differentiates business resumes, master's level resumes from entry level resumes, is including impact, such as, you did X, which resulted in a certain amount of money generated, or percentage of sales increase or decrease, things like that. So I want you to double check what's outputted and see, like, does it include all these things? Then I also want you to think, I, I want you to think, is what was written, is this true? Is this really what I did? Also, can I speak to this? As you refine and take those bullet points and make them your own, can you speak to it? If someone said, oh, tell me more about this part of your resume, can you say like, oh yeah, during that time, and answer that? If not, don't put it in there. If it's not true and you can't speak to it, then it's not something you should have on your resume. Also ask, is this how I would say it, or should I be tweaking the language? This doesn't sound like me. And in general, does it sound like what someone would be talking about? Does it sound like how people would talk or write out a bullet point? If it doesn't, then it's probably not going to look good to the reader. So a couple checks and balances if you are going to use AI significantly in the development of your resume. We also have a lot more prompts on another PowerPoint that my colleague Bridget has put together. And so when you get this deck, you can use this to also look at more prompts for not only resume writing, but cover letters, LinkedIn, other things, using things like ChatGPT and your documents, your career management documents. Okay, part 3 of this presentation is about format and feedback. So going back to the Job Closer book, what your aim should be is you're aiming for a resume that Steve Dalton would say is called objectively perfect and subjectively good enough. So what does that mean? Objectively perfect means error-free. That's about the only thing people can agree on a resume, is there shouldn't be any errors on it. They may want certain parts top or bottom, they might want colors, they may want pictures, they may want this or that, and these are things we don't have in our template. But the main thing that every resume writer wants is an error-free resume. So that means spelling correct. It's all aligned properly. There's consistent formatting. What is a good enough resume? Steve in the book will talk about a basic resume, a good resume, and a great resume. But really, great resumes may be more time than they're worth. And so a good enough resume is something that's error-free. That's what all resumes should be. But the bullet should have accomplishments like those outcomes I listed on the previous slide. And results. Results when they can be quantified. So those are the things that we're looking for in a good enough resume. Now, you may say, I think this is good. I think I've generated some good new resume. But what are the things that we can use, that we can suggest you use to like double check your work? There's two main things. One is our awesome tool, VMock, another like AI-based tool that will scan your resume and give you feedback right away. And so whenever you're ready, you can sign up for a VMock account, upload your resume, put it through there. The other thing is after you've put it through VMock and made those quick changes, you can set up a coaching appointment with one of our coaches to have a final look over and say, like, this is good to go. That can always feel really reassuring when a coach says, yep, this looks great. This will look great to a hiring manager. Okay, those are the main things I want to talk about with a resume. my last slide here about beyond the resume is, like I said from the outset, is resumes are not my favorite thing. They're a necessary thing to include in a job search and when networking. People want to see it. But I love this quote. This quote so resonates with me. I'll read it here. So Steve Dalton again speaking here, but I wish this was my quote is, I too frequently see seekers use their resume as an excuse to delay the scarier, more important part of the search, namely networking. Is that I see a lot of people come in and say, is my resume good enough? And sure, there's times where I was like, we really need to revise this resume significantly. But often, after a couple of reviews, we're good to go. And what I really want you to be thinking about is, okay, my resume is good enough. It's ready to go. I've spent my 3 hours on it. Good to go. Now I got to get out there and do these other two things. Networking, which is number one way to get a job. So there's link in the chat of resources for networking. And two, keep in mind that resumes lead to interviews, but it's the interviews that are going to lead to the offers. A resume rarely is enough to get you a job offer, to land you a job. So we got lots of resources on interviewing. Those are two different presentations right there. I'm not going to go into those, but Julie has put the links in the chat so you can jump over to those when you're ready to use those resources. Okay. 2 minutes to spare. I'm going to go back through the chat, make sure I didn't miss anything, but if there's more questions you want to add, definitely add them to the chat, or if you want to come off mute and ask your question aloud, happy to answer those. And if you're like, I'm empowered, I've got the resources I need, feel free to jump, go on with your day, maybe even start crafting your resume and then emailing it over to me. You can see our links to our resources, my email. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn and stay in touch with you that way. Okay, so going back to the first one, how to quantify what I currently do on my resume so I can change career paths. So quantifying really helps with knowing the baseline, what you're starting with, and then measuring that. Sometimes that's hard to do going forward, but and sometimes you don't own that impact. But what I really want you to do is I want you to, for everything going forward, always think about the baseline and what the results are going forward. And if you have a chance to dig back into some data, if you're still working at that organization, try and figure out percentages, dollars, things like that. Current job application trends. There's always tons of trends going on with job applications. There's always advice for 2025 and beyond. My number one thing, though, the tried and true, is always, 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 whether it's a tough job market like it is right now or a great job market in other years, like go back to 2021 when everyone was jumping jobs, it's networking. I really can't stress that enough. Okay, everyone has an opinion on resumes. ATS. So ATS is a bit of a boogeyman, I think. I think ATS is overblown. And most recruiters I talk to look at just about every resume that they receive. So while it's good to make sure that your bullet points are optimized, don't overthink it. Don't spend more than the 3 hours on your resume. You really want to make sure that you're spending time networking and not worrying about, is this ATS perfect? Because most of the time a recruiter or a live person is going to look at it. Okay, I know I didn't get to this one before. Julie's questions. Best practices for maintaining discretion, obtaining NDA for a prior position. That is a great question, and that's a little harder one to answer in a webinar, but Julie, I'd love to reconnect and talk through that, but usually trying to use some vague but still understandable language. So like, what generally were you doing? What type of company was it as far as industry without actually naming the company? Okay, so the second question, for individuals going through a career pivot, ensuring that transferable skills are highlighted. That's great. And so tools that you can use like AI, like I showed, or other tools like a job description can really help see like, okay, what am I good at? And that could be the assessment too, the career leader assessment, or the career Clifton Strengths assessment, I should say. That can be another way that you say, okay, I've got these strengths and this is my language. This is what's in the job description. Which of these things are synonyms? Okay, I think I'm getting further. How to showcase analytical and marketing skills. Tricky because I don't have prior experience in this area. Yeah, that's great. So one of the things I could have had a whole slide and section on is if you don't have prior skills, one of the ways to refresh your resume is to get more skills in that, whether it's a class, an online learning, LinkedIn learning, but also looking at your assignments or things you're volunteering for. How might there be some transferable skills there? That's a great question though, and kind of a specific one. I'd really recommend Hakeem, like meeting up with your coach for that one. Okay. Thanks of the link. Thank you.
I think you covered all the other questions that were in the chat.
Okay. So I got the ones in the chat. I see there's some people still in here. Okay. Okay, well, yeah. So what you can do for that is if you haven't met with a coach yet, I would recommend following the coaching sign up link. And if you have met with a coach before, um, send your coach an email, say, hey, I learned about Clifton Strengths from Will. I would love to get access to that. But basically, a coach can work with our front desk to get you instructions on how to take that. But there's a little bit of like context we want to give people before they take it. So make sure you check in with your coach. And if you don't have a coach yet, just go through Handshake and sign up for a coaching appointment to make a, appointment with a coach. Yeah, are there other questions people want to ask out loud or drop in the chat? Like I said, this was trying to keep this brief. That time boxing concept of 3 hours for your resume. I only wanted to give you 30 minutes of content here today. Any other questions? And if not, Julie and I, before most of you jumped on, I think we're talking about pond hockey tournaments this weekend. Julie has a pond hockey business going on this weekend to get some cider from, I think, a cute 6-year-old in the neighborhood. So if you're down in Nokomis this weekend and you see Julie out in the wild, get yourself some hot cider.
Yeah, if you see a little kid on the ice, go spend 50 cents. It's probably more than 50 cents these days, I suppose. She's a hustler, so. She takes Venmo, though.
And again, my contact information is on this slide. So if you want to connect directly with me, if you have further questions specific to your resume refreshing process, love to connect with you. But otherwise, if there's no more questions today, we'll let you all go, get on with your Friday afternoon and enjoy your weekend.
Take care, everyone.